Hello and welcome to The Sound of Economics. Today we're here with a special edition of the Backstage series from the annual meetings of Bruegel, the Brussels-based economic think tank. I'm Nicholas Barrett, speaking with Jean Pisani-Ferry, Senior Fellow at Bruegel, and we're just coming off the back of a panel on enhancing Europe's economic sovereignty with Pierre Heilbronn, Vice President of the EBRD, Mark Leonard, Director of the ECFR, Sabrine Venard, Director General of Trade of the European Commission, and Maria Spaiak, MEP from Greece. So, Jean, what were the most interesting ideas discussed during your panel?
Well, the whole panel was about the paper we put forward at Bruegel with the CFR, which is a paper about an issue nobody was discussing 2 years ago, which are the linkages or the tensions between the geopolitical sphere and the economic sphere. We used to reason as if the economic sphere could be completely isolated, completely separated most of the time from the geopolitical sphere. Now we're seeing, the China-US rivalry. We're seeing more generally China and the US as two powers that do not separate the economic sphere from the geopolitical sphere. So for the EU, it's a shock. And the question is how to respond to that, and what room should be made to this interconnection between the geopolitics and the economics. So we discussed the analysis, and I think on the analysis everybody agreed that there is an issue, that has to be addressed, it can be dangerous, it may not be desirable, it can be used as an excuse for special interest purposes. As Sabine Veillant said, if you're dealing with monsters, you risk becoming a monster yourself, quoting Nietzsche. But nobody objected to the idea, to the notion that there is something to be addressed and tackled by the EU.
So, did you come out of that panel with any kind of recommendations for policymakers?
Yes. First on the attitude. I mean, there's broad agreement that we should be resisting the temptation of the U.S. to sort of weaponize their role in the international economic architecture. And that we also have to deal with the fact that Chinese companies can be instruments from the state power, serving the state power. At the same time, it's not the interest of the EU to sort of try to sort of block the development of China or decouple from China. I think the EU has a stake in this international economic system and in preserving as much as possible the autonomy of this rule-based international order. So that's the general philosophy. Then we discussed specific proposals.
So how do you deal with monsters without becoming a monster?
Well, we discussed three of our specific proposals. One has to do with distortion arising from state aid, especially from the Chinese companies, but perhaps also other companies from other countries. So how to deal with that, being known that there is a regime for subsidies in the WTO, but that it's relatively weak and that it does not cover the services market. So the proposal we're putting forward in the paper is we should be dealing with it within the WTO, but there are also instruments for assessing distortion to competition arising from state aid that are the state aid regime at work within the EU. And so the same methodology can be used for assessing distortion coming from other governments outside the EU, even though obviously the ban on state aid that the EU has possibility to impose does not apply to foreign governments, but at least we should be using the methodology. So on this idea, there was no major objection to the fact that at least in terms of methodology, it can be used. Now there was more discussion on what we said on investment, where we're saying that a foreign investment gives access to the entire EU internal market. So that there's a cross-country dimension. A country can welcome, let's say, Chinese investment for domestic reasons, but that can be objected by other member states. And what's a way to deal with it? And the paper proposes that if there is a new dimension and there are reasons to object to this investment, there should be the possibility of having a review and even blocking this investment by a qualified majority. So interestingly, the Greek MEP, Marios Spiraki, strongly objected to it and took the example of the Chinese investment in the Piraeus port that came at a time when Greece was privatizing, and it was told to privatize, and nobody in the EU wanted to buy. So they opened it to Chinese investment. The Chinese invested, and Chinese have brought, capital and have developed the port, have developed the traffic. So in a way, that was characteristic of this attitude of certain member states after having opened up to Chinese investment, who say, okay, now, I have a strong relationship with China. I don't want you to interfere with it. So interesting discussion on that, with some saying we can have a procedure for blocking if we're careful enough. Obviously, if it's not used as a way to be instrumentalized by lobbies, and others saying no. On the competition, our proposal is to say, there has been a discussion on competition. There is a discussion on whether in certain sectors, certain industries, certain companies, there should be European ownership, even though the pure competition concern might lead to a situation where European competitors are wiped out by foreign competitors. And we said, the position we have in the paper is we shouldn't soften the competition rules. Competition rules are essential. They're essential for the performance of the European economy. But there can be situations where on security grounds there is an objection to a pure competition-based decision. So we're saying that when the Commission takes a decision in a competition case, the High Representative should be able to evoke a security clause saying, okay, perfectly sound that this merger is blocked on competition grounds, but on security grounds, I would want the Commission to take on board other dimensions of the problem. So we propose that, and this is a very strong proposal. It's clearly different from the position taken by certain member states, by, for example, French and German ministers after the Alstom-Siemens case, who said there should be a review, the Commission should be much more open to building European champions, to mergers on purely industrial grounds. So we don't take this position, we're still taking the position, and actually it does not, most probably doesn't apply to railroad. We're taking the position no to this softening of the competition policy, but yes to the consideration that there can be other dimensions. So that's clearly something on which the debate has been launched, and that's the role of the paper by Bruegel.
And if people want to read the paper, can they read the paper at bruegel.org?
Sorry?
Is the paper available to read?
The paper is obviously available. It's a paper that there are two papers. There's one that's developed the argument. It's called Redefining Economic Sovereignty, European Economic Sovereignty. And the other one, which is a shorter version of it, is included in the memo. It's a memo to the High Representative.
These memos are available at bruegel.org now. John, thank you very much for joining us and tolerating my horrendous pronunciation. I hope you had a good day today. And thank you for listening. And do come back to the Sound of Economics podcast for more like this. Thank you.